Hey, how's everybody doing? So I'm going to show you today how we at Singing Tree Flutes cut our Fipple edge. That's the square hole that we have on our Native American style flutes. So I'm going to show you that. This here is one of the most important parts to a good sounding flute. A lot of people don't realize that. It's more important than how smooth the inside is. It's more important than really any other aspect. I'd say 90% of the sound quality of a flute has to do with your Fipple cut here. So I'm going to show you how we do that. And what I'm doing is I'm drilling the pilot hole into the center of the slow air chamber, the small air chamber. And so this is what it looks like after we've done our routering, where you have the two channels. We're drilling our 3/16 hole to come out right here at the bottom edge of this hole. The reason why it's important for it to come out here is because after we create the proper distance for our Fipple cut, you want to be not right up on this edge. A lot of people think you should be right on the edge of this with your square Fipple hole, but being here, I get way better sound quality. For some reason, the flute becomes more breathy when I have it right up close to this. So I want to come out right about here. All right, so I'm going to drill this first hole here. And I'm just feeling with my finger where I know I'll come out. You know, that's just a lot of tool experience. And this is just a rough hole. It's going to be later on. You see where it came out? That's about where you want to be. It's not going to hurt if it comes somewhere in there, you know, say a 1/4 inch more into here. It's not going to hurt anything, but you just want to make sure that the square Fipple that we cut is going to come out not too close to this edge here. All right, so that's just rough. Later on, what we'll do is we'll come and clean this hole up, and we will burn that out with a 5/16 bit. So that's the first thing we do, is drill this hole before our square Fipple. And I want to show you how we do that on a drone flute. This one I definitely have to make marks because I want to make sure that that both Fipples come out square and even with each other. If they're offset, what that means is that the key or the tuning is going to be a little bit off as well. That can be adjusted with tuning holes, but it's important to try to get those as close as possible. Okay, and so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a mark that goes across here, and I'm also, depending on the bore size, this one's 1 1/4 inch, I'm going to be looking for dead center there. Sometimes I just make a mark right there. That shows me that 7/8 inch, see that, is about where I want to be to get center. So then I just make 7/8 inch on this side, right? 7/8 inch on this side. There it is, boom. And then I take my square like this, and I just draw a line. It doesn't have to be perfect or anything like that. It's just a little bit of a guideline. Okay, now back to it. I'm going to draw a line in the front of the flute, right about where the center of my router space is between the two. So I'm going to flip this back over, basically feeling where that is. And, you know, I have a really good eye, I'll say, but I'm not as much of a precision guy as other people. So when I draw these marks, I'm not too concerned whether I'm drilling directly on that line. That's not important to me. What's important is that I know when I feel, like I did on the single flute, where I want to come out on that, which that's falling right about that line. The main thing that line is for is to keep my holes straight. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm doing two different holes, I want them to come out as close as possible to the same length. Okay, so now that we have both a single and a drone flute drilled into the slow air chamber, we're going to take a smaller, I use an 1/8 inch, that's extra safe. I'm going to use an 1/8 inch drill bit to drill 2 pilots. You could just drill 1 pilot in the center. I do 2 pilots now next to each other because it's just makes the next step a little bit easier for me. Okay, you see what I did there? That's good. And I'm going to do that on these ones too, and then I want to explain something to you. Because another thing that people may not realize is how important the distance between this hole here and these holes is. And I will say that you'll see a lot of Native American style flutes out there that have this hole equally filed or cut to be a square hole as well. I've learned that it's not that important, and for production's sake and for efficiency, I can just burn that in a nice, clean, usually 5/16 hole, nice and smooth, and direct it towards these holes, so it's at about a 45-degree angle, and then that projects the air in the way that I want to, the same way as that square angled beveled hole would, but it saves me lots and lots of time. Okay, so I won't bother drilling all these other ones I'm going to do, but I need to now get a razor knife, and I'll be right back to you. Okay, now I am going to show you how I cut this square Fipple hole. Again, the most important part of our flute making process for good sound quality. I'll just show you on the one flute. Same thing applies on a drone flute as well. And so what I do is I take an X-Acto knife, or any kind of craft utility knife, I think they call them. And my favorite blades that I've found are made by Olfa. And Olfa has a really nice, also padded, kind of a larger hobby knife blade, or handle, that's a little bit larger and padded, and you can get a good grip. This is just what I have on hand right next to me right now. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually take this X-Acto knife blade, and I'm going to cut this to my square. And this is, I want to be pretty precise here. And again, if I wanted to be really precise, if you're new to this, maybe you want to draw yourself a square. And I would say, for optimum sound quality, like I said, I'm a good eyeballer, so I know just by looks that that's pretty much exactly a 1/4 inch. And what I would say is I use these needle files, and they are a little under a 1/4 inch. I would say a 1/4 inch in depth this way is maximum for most flutes. When you get into the contrabass, you want to go bigger, but for your standard keys, 3/4, 7/8, and 1 inch bore, I would say no larger than a 1/4 inch if you want a good clear sound quality. Okay, so I'm going to start by cutting this hole, and I'm going to just take this blade and I'm going to join the two holes. See how I'm just cutting a little triangle there? And I will say, be very careful. This is a very sharp tool, and it's very easy to cut yourself, so be very mindful of what it is that you're doing here. And so now that I'm getting them two holes joined, I can start cutting my rectangle. A newer blade, the sharper the blade, the better that you're going to be. All right, and so again, if I was being really, really precise, I may have measured the distance from here to here. And these holes are not square the way that I make them for my ideal sound quality. They're rectangle. So I would, just by guesstimate, I would say 3/16 to just a hair under a 1/4 inch is the right depth this way you want to be. And I would say 5/16 to 3/8 inch width this way would be about right for the sound quality that we get. And I would say, as a general rule, the larger this Fipple hole is, that's what we call this here, the larger this Fipple hole is, potentially the louder the flute could be. but also the breathier your flute could be. So if this especially goes this way, you're going to get more and more of a breathy flute. And as I'm doing this, I'll also point out this distance from here to here. I told you earlier that this hole here, this is just a pilot hole, and then I'm going to go and burn this hole out with a 5/16 bit. Sometimes I'll go up to 3/8 on a bass flute. 5/16 bit. That gives me plenty of airflow for good volume, and you can just rest your breath in there, and you're going to get a good clean tone right from the start of your blow. So that's why I like to make it the way that I do, with a little bit larger or more air going through at one time. So also the distance from here to here is very important. If you end up, our best distance between the edge of this hole after it's burned to the edge of this is going to be a 1/2 inch to 3/8. I try not to get any closer than 3/8, but a 1/2 inch is just as good as well. Getting into 3/4 inch is just too long, and I've noticed that my flutes, the sound quality is being affected by that. So that's just all really kind of detailed stuff that I've learned over close to 30 years now of doing this. So I'm pretty happy with that size there. And I can go ahead and use this as a guide. As you can see, it's right about where I want to be. So once I file this way, this way, it'll give me just enough space to probably slip that in there. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it over to the other side. And so now I'm just going to square it up, because you can see it doesn't look nearly as square on this side yet. So I'm just evening the edges. And the more precise that you can be with this, the better. If you have a lot of like frayed wood in here, that can all affect the sound quality. That's why I say a sharp blade is important. Wood type helps, like Western cedar, for example. That one, it's kind of a chewy wood, so as you're cutting, it might crumble out on the back edge here and here. You can still make a good sounding flute, but there might be more filing that you have to do. Okay, so that's pretty square. Now we're going to go for our angle. Okay, so why do I prefer 2-piece flutes over 1-piece flutes? So there are ways that you can make a solid wood flute, and they do have their perks. There's something really beautiful about having a solid 1-piece flute as opposed to 2 halves being glued together. It's really it's sweet looking that way. You can use a lathe to drill it, and there's some reputable makers that make their flutes like that. But I have never made that conversion, and this is why, because I have a very specific way of cutting my Fipple edge so that I get the sound quality that I do from a flute. And so what I do is a flared cut on my angle that I'm going to do here, which I'm about to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to score this here with my knife. And you see how I'm scoring it at a flared angle. If I had a flute that I drilled, you know, and that I only had access in this way, there's no way that I can get as precise with my angle here. And there's no way that I can really flare that. So now I'm creating it to where when we put our sound block on top and that air goes through, that potentially it's guiding the air to go through the whole chamber, you know, so that potentially can increase the volume of the flute. And this is all theory. I mean, I can't really say exactly what it does. I just know that we're happy with our sound quality here, and having this flare, I really feel like helps. The other key thing about the way that I do my angle is there's a double angle. And again, this would be very difficult to achieve if I didn't have access to the inside of this. So now that I have that nice angle cut. And again, I'm gonna clean this up with a file too, but that's a pretty clean cut. You want that as clean as possible. I'm paying attention to the angle from here all the way down to here, that's looking pretty even on both sides. Hope that's a good shot that you guys can see that well. Okay, and then I'm gonna turn it around again and show you this. We have about an 1/8 inch, maybe a little bit more. If you were to cut this flared angle all the way to the tip of this, now you have very little surface for when you blow this flute, where when you guide that air to hit this Fipple edge, you want a little bit more. So a little bit more meat there for the air to catch that. And what I've noticed is if it's too thin right there and it's a real sharp edge, you're gonna get a little bit breathier of a flute that way. So you'll get a little bit more hiss in your flute. There's something about the way that the air rolls back when you have the double angle that I'm gonna show you. And you potentially will have, it'll overblow easier. So if that edge is too sharp and there's nowhere for that air to catch on that Fipple edge, potentially it's going to overblow easier as well. All of those things can be adjusted as you learn about flute making, but that's part of the reason. So now, I hope the light's good enough. I'm going to go in from this angle and start cutting my secondary angle. Does that make sense? These are all some pretty big secrets to Singing Tree here that I'm sharing with you about how we get our sound quality. So I think that's about good. And now I'll show you again from the inside. You can see how we have a double angle. You see that? We have the first angle right here. That's the more sharp angle. And we have our steeper angle here. And that steep angle, I don't want to go that steep angle all the way through to the flute. I like to have it flare and be more gradual and guide that air through the full chamber, but that steepness there I think is to just create a more firm, solid bottom note and also potentially more clarity. That is the ideal way. And so then I just file it up and clean it up. This file here. These needle files, I don't know where you live in the country, but we get these needle files for $4, I think, at Harbor Freight Tools. And they come in a whole pack of different size, and there's about, within that pack, there's about 4 blades that are, some are pointed, some are flat on the end, that work perfectly for these. And you can get diamond needle files and all that, but I've been using these Harbor Freight ones for years for $4, and they work just fine. Okay, and then I'm gonna really file this edge here on the inside and clean it up. All right. The cleaner the better. I'm letting you know. Cleaner the better for sound quality. And yeah, I think that looks pretty good. Just checking any little nick that the air could catch on. Yeah. Pretty good. All right. Well, there you have it. That's how we cut our Fipple to make a good sounding Native American style flute. Lastly, to tell you about how we cut our Fipples here, one important thing that I forgot to mention is the thickness of your wood here. So we talked about the double angle that we have, the square, we talked about the width and the appropriate depth and all of that. But another very important factor to us getting the sound quality that we get is the thickness of the wood. And I'll just say for a 1-inch bore flute, you're gonna want about 3/16 thickness between the top of your routed edge to the flat part here. Many people do that different. Some are thinner, some are thicker. All different flute makers have their preferences. We like it pretty thin. I would call that pretty thin. So let's just call it 3/16 is a good place for your standard keyed flutes. Okay.